Alchemical celibacy. What is sexual alchemy? Today we're going to discuss that in this video. I appreciate you guys watching. If you are new here, thank you for following me. If you're an old school person that has been here for a while, I appreciate you. Please spread this video around. Please share this with people who need to see it. All of the help really goes a long way. I am working to get out of a lot of the debts and stuff that I've kind of accrued over the last number of years working on building up all this data and getting credentials and getting my PhD and things like that. So I really appreciate all the help. It really does make a difference in my life. All of your likes, your comments, all the support really. And I do have an online university, an AI tool. I have books. I have tons of ways that you can support me. But I'll showcase those later on in the video. So let's get started. What is sexual alchemy and why is it important? Why is like semen retention and celibacy during specific times of the month very important? Well, it has to do with the cycles of life and the cycles of time within our bodies. We have lunar cycles. Those lunar cycles are the inner alchemical cycles. Women understand it as their menstrual cycles. Men don't really understand this. This is like a thing that's a really big deal that men don't really know. And there's reasons for that. Men are more on a daily and yearly cycle. Their testosterone rises roughly 20% in the morning, and it also rises 20% in the springtime. Testosterone falls 20% in the evening, and it also falls 20% in the autumn time. So really it's a lineage with the sun. That's their main mode of living. And then for women, of course, it's the moon. They have the 28 roughly day lunar cycle, and they're much more in line with the moon. Now, this is all really important because it turns out women also have a daily and yearly hormonal cycle, although not as major, and men have a monthly hormonal cycle, although it's not as talked about, not as well known or received, right? But all of these cycles are our body's way of adapting to light signals through our eyes, through our body's skin, through the way that the brain picks up electromagnetic radiation. And our body then takes those cues to undergo different processes. So for example, for women specifically, when specific light frequencies, touch your skin, go in through your eyes, etc., that's what activates a lot of your cycles. However, women have also synced up with other women, and that's because of the same exact type of stimuli. It's light or it's energy-based stimuli, which can sometimes steer a woman off of her natural cycle. So just to start off, I've got a couple of quick books that you can read if you're really interested in today's topic. One of them is called Cupid's Poisoned Arrow. This was a really good one. I highly recommend reading this from not only the woman's perspective, but also from, I guess, just more of a practical relationship perspective. If you want something a little bit more, well, actually, Think and Grow Rich is how I learned about semen retention initially many, many years ago. It wasn't really anything that I had known about and studied. And it actually really wasn't that big of a topic until I understood sexual reservation, right? Think and Grow Rich talks about that. And then The Perfect Matrimony is another one if you want more of the esoteric by Samuel Aounweor. Very good book by him. This is more on the esoteric side of things, but it still has a lot of really great information there as well. So sexual alchemy is something that's been practiced by some of the most intelligent, greatest people that have ever existed. One of those being Nikola Tesla. Tesla was asked in an interview while he was alive about sexual transmutation. I'm actually not really 100% sure on the source of this, but he supposedly, a lot of people quote this, said that he could not have survived if he had permitted his sexual energies to be diverted into the channels of sex. What does that mean? Basically, hormonal energy is, and then the Kama Sutra, forgot about that one too. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Kama Sutra as well, but this was an old school book that talked about it too. Sexual energy is really at the core a form of lower based frequency that our bodies naturally produce. Okay, so in the lower regions of our body, when we eat food and when we're high in energy, when we have a lot of energy, you'll often see an association between sex and like food. Like you go out to dinner and then you go home. Or sorry, that was one of my services. That's cool. So you go out to dinner, you go home, right? And then you make love, right? And that's like the whole romantic scene. And the reason for that is because lower, if you're extremely tired, or if you haven't eaten all day, 9 times out of 10, you're probably not going to have the energy to be horny, because a lot of that is very interlinked, right? The ability for us to even have the energy for our bodies to go forward with, the act itself, we're going to need that lower body energy. So it can be an overproduction of that. And what you can do is you can use that overproductive energy and channel it into other things. And the more that you make a cyclical habit of it, the more your body naturally gets used to it. And instead of wanting to just, have sex all day, wasting away, because that's what you're doing when you have sex all day, especially if you're male, then, that's one avenue. But instead of doing that, you can channel that energy into something productive, so that you're constantly being fed energy from the inside, so that you can keep working and keep doing something, which is kind of the point that Tesla had made. And what you'll notice throughout all of history is that some of the most successful people who are inventors or geniuses in their field are very sexually celibate, to a degree where, like, they even would piss off their wives, which is understandable. But those guys didn't have the full scope, and I'm going to give you guys the full scope. I'm going to tell you what a lot of this is. I'm going to give you my opinions on it, where I think they did it right and wrong, et cetera, et cetera. But the Chinese, the Tao, the Nadon, they had a much different approach. They had a much different look to it. They were looking at sex very similar to the Kama Sutra people, where they were like, no, it's a ritual. It's a practice that you can engage in. And if you stay the middle path, which I'm going to talk about in a second, then you can actually achieve enlightenment and or immortality through sex. So this is really, really important to kind of pay attention to, because there's so many misconceptions out there. In fact, there is that one article. Let me pull it up. 21 times per month prostate cancer. I forgot. I wanted to bring this up specifically. Normally, I wouldn't, but this is like the big one that everybody talks about, right? It was some Harvard study. This study is probably accurate. This study is probably real. The research indicates that men who ejaculate 21 times per month or more have a 20% lower risk of prostate cancer. That's probably true. You want to know why? Because if you are just constantly depleting the prostate, then there's not really much chance for the prostate to create cancerous cells, right? This is not this isn't a call against ejaculation or for ejaculation of what I'm explaining here. This is a conversation of balance and responsibility and understanding how important sex really is. It's not just something for you to have. But here's the deal. When they do studies like this does not talk, okay, about, look, 21 times a month with a 31% lower, God damn it, lower risk compared to those who ejaculate 4 to 7 times a month. Okay, so all they studied for was prostate cancer. They're not going to look at how this depletes plasma, how this screws up the circadian rhythm, how this makes your this screws with your blood. This, all of these things are part of ejaculation for men specifically. But what they did was they tricked you. They've got to trick you in some way. Besides, having a scientific study that promotes men to ejaculate more is exactly what the elites want. They want us to be in this low energy, low testosterone, docile state, which should really piss a lot of people off, because it's just another way that they inculcate control onto the public. This is why the American country is oversexed, right? It's to keep people enslaved. It's to keep people liberated. But then you have the alternative, basically, which is that you have a country like Japan, which has, anime drawings of little girls all over the place. They're like underage, and the men are like frequent masturbators. None of them can get girlfriends, and they commit suicide, or they jump into the train, or they go to the forest and hang themselves, right? What we're talking about here is balance. Okay, balance, the middle path. So let me showcase to you, again, this is just like mainly how the Western world loves to lie. Yeah, just like have sex, just have tons of sex. Who cares? As long as you're not inventing stuff like Nikola Tesla, They studied how those successful guys operated, and then they basically yanked them out. The reality is that guys like Tesla were not getting laid. Okay, they weren't having sex, they weren't getting laid. Sigmund Freud, I think, is one of the biggest psyops in psychology. He was not good. I'm sorry, but like if you actually read his works and you study what he was about, okay, sure. If you're like psychology 101, high school, college, freshman level psychology, sure, Freud's great because that's like the perfect time frame to be studying this. But for a guy who like lived to be what, 60 something, 70 something, and all he did was make everything about sex while also remaining completely celibate to the point where his wife was pissed off at him because they never engaged in coitus. Like that is way extreme. Okay, you're just making your wife upset and angry, and he was so over sex that everything became about sex. That's the problem. Is you cannot restrain yourself. This is like a big thing of what I talked about yesterday when it comes to like the devil and the idea of the devil. When you have a fear of something because of your own lack of self-control, that is where those external negative forces can, I guess, take control over you. But it's really never external, is it? It's always internal. It's always you doing it, right? The external thing is like the sex or the drugs or the alcohol or whatever, but that's just outside of you, right? The inside is really like nobody makes you go to the liquor store and buy liquor. Nobody does that, right? But you do it. You're the one who does it. So there's a level here psychologically where we have to talk about attachment, okay? Because you're either over attached or under attached. Let's get into some of the data, and I'm just going to flash these up. You can go and read these. Hormonal response after masturbation in young healthy men. This one, and where's the other one? This one. These two are talking about pornography, okay? So let's just get this one out of the way. Porn's bad, okay? It's really bad for your brain, rots your brain. It trains you to basically be a sociopath. And why is it bad? Because if you've seen like how a porn addict's brain versus like a heroin addict's brain for the same amount of time, they look very similar. You're asking, how could somebody who's taking heroin have such a negative impacted brain compared to somebody who's masturbating with porn? I'll tell you the very, very simplified answer. It's not 100% like, scientifically literate, but it basically works like this. When you take heroin, your body essentially lowers its ability to create CSF, lowers its ability to create plasma, lowers its ability to create white blood cells, things like that your body needs. When you ejaculate, you're releasing those things. Okay, so it's basically the same. When you are a man and you ejaculate, you are ejaculating out plasma, which your brain and your bones and your body need in order for you to continue to survive. When I was studying in a yeshiva, which is like a Jewish conglomerate or whatever, there was a man, and he was a crippled Jew. Okay, very, very, very crippled. Great guy, really nice guy is what I mean to say. I didn't get to know him well enough, but he was a really nice guy. And he told me, I was actually teaching him about sacred secretion, and we were making cross comparisons, and he had the Torah and the Tefillim, and he was rapping, and he was explaining things to me from his culture, and I was explaining to him about this exact same thing, and he started to cry, and he said, "So you're telling me the reason that I'm crippled is because I was addicted to masturbation, and I was doing it multiple times a day?" I said, I don't know. Like, what did the doctors say? He said, well, they said they couldn't figure it out. I said, then more than likely, were you a major alcoholic? He said, yeah, I drank a lot. I said, was there anything else? Any big drugs? No. I was like, okay, so basically alcohol and masturbation to porn were your big things? He said, yeah. And I mean, when I say this man was crippled, like he was very, very, very crippled. He was probably older, probably like 50s, 60s. But you got to also understand this man was drinking like every day and he was masturbating every day. So it's a horrible shame, but it's all about evolution. Right? He started to cry. He realized his mistakes, and he was like, "Well, I'm glad I don't do any of that stuff anymore." But the whole point is that is actually how bad it can get. Now, he was an extreme case, but you've got to again walk the fine line in the middle path and understand how this stuff works. You can't just be shooting your load off willy nilly. And when I was a teenager, I get it. Like, I was definitely nowhere close. And I'm not saying this because I'm ashamed of it or anything. I'm just being really directly honest. If you knew anybody that I went to high school with, we would all go hang out at a friend's house when we were young kids. back when I was in like middle high school. Back when I was in high school, I had a group of friends that I would hang out with, and we would all go to each other's houses, and all they wanted to do was look at porn. I would sit in the other room and play video games, but they would go and they'd look at porn together, which I think is kind of gay. But not trying to, not that I have a problem with that, but it is. It's kind of gay. Like that's what I thought when I was a kid. When I was like 14, 15 years old, I was like, it's kind of gay. You're gonna look at porn with other dudes, but they were getting away with it because their parents were stricter, I guess, or whatever. I had the freedom to be able to look at that stuff. Shit, when I was like 14, I was going on 4chan. I was seeing way worse stuff than just porn. I was ignoring the porn. You know what I mean? Like I was like, I don't care about this. It probably did way more damage than I needed to. You want to talk about like Kabbalistic paths of wisdom? I was like going on like parts of the internet I shouldn't have been on. I was also a neglected child that my parents didn't give a shit what I did. So it's all about the learning structure. But basically, those guys, I don't think they ever really grew up because it was all about enforcement, and they're too afraid to take big risks and stuff like that. Me, I never really cared. Right when I was 7 years old, my father was showing me pornography because he didn't want me to be gay, and he was using worse words than that. But he didn't want me to be gay. He would say it all the time. He's like, I don't, and I'm a Cancer male, so maybe that's where the fear came in because I was a crybaby when I was a kid. Like everything made me cry. But it was just more of a response. Like I was overwhelmed, right? It wasn't like fear or sadness. It was just overwhelmed all the time because my two parents were fire signs, Leo and Sagittarius. So anyway, I'm oversharing, but the whole point is, when I was 7, I was really deterred away from the pornography because my father was bringing, and I didn't like my dad pretty much my whole life. Like he would bring me in the basement when my mom wasn't home and be like, all right, I'm going to show you something really cool. And we go to like boobs.com and other porn websites. And he'd show me all this porn. And it was because he didn't want me to be gay, which is just ridiculous. But long story short, I was already over porn by the time I was 10 because I was like, that stuff's nasty. I don't need to care for it. That doesn't mean that I didn't partake, in it every once in a while, but I was doing it a lot less than my friends. And I think that's actually one of the bigger reasons why I look young. I'm 31 years old. I don't look it. Maybe I don't act like it. I don't know. But ultimately, the reason, that was a big thing for me is basically what I'm getting at is I was a lot more celibate than my friends were growing up. They would talk about the girls they were sleeping with. They were talking about, oh, I watched this one chick. She had the biggest boobs, biggest titties, blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, all right, like, whatever. That's cool. I'm going to play video games and do that kind of stuff because I just found it not productive. When I would get overwhelmed and I get horny, I would do it, but I was doing it at a much less rate than them. So the whole point that I'm getting at is that I personally, from my own experience of oversharing with you guys today, I definitely think that impacted me very much so. Because if you look at all those guys that I went to high school now, I don't really talk with them anymore. They look really freaking old. They look so old. And I think drinking did a lot of that because I also don't drink. I'll have like some wine, every once in a while. I'll drink with my family, on occasion. And if I drink, sometimes I'll drink a lot, but that's just the Irish and Italian genetics in me. But I really don't drink a lot. And so it's really about life choices, right? That's my whole point. But anyway, porn is bad. We already know that. I just kind of wanted to overshare a little bit there. When you do ejaculate, especially for men, prolactin spikes, dopamine, oxytocin level shifts, blah, blah, blah. This is all stuff that you can look up. Here's another one: endocrine response to masturbation, induced orgasm in healthy men following a 3-week sexual abstinence. So this was another study. And there's actually a lot of different studies that are like this that basically detail and talk about how at certain points of frequency, okay, depends on the amount and everything else, when you have proper ejaculation in the male body, and by the way, ladies, I will talk about you, but when you have proper masturbation in the male body, not masturbation, but ejaculation, I should say, in the male body, then it's actually not healthy, but it's okay, basically, right? Now, let's get into, like, a lot of people, and it's like, no, you got to save your seed, like, all the time. First of all, yes, your body can actually do that. I don't know where all these people got this idea that like men have to come. That was like never the big thing. All right, if you study a lot of ancient cultures, they never really saw it that way. The cultures that were worse off were the ones that were shooting it all the time. The ones that were better, that were creating things, inventing things, they had more of a system to it. Okay, so get rid of this idea that there's a biological need for males needing to ejaculate. That is false. That is propaganda. That is a lie. All right, that is for weak-willed men that can't control themselves. Now, does that not mean that men get horny? Of course they do, right? But it's about frequency. And here's the caveat, because I'm going to talk about women in a second. For orgasm specifically, it is so damaging for a man. All right, and I'm going to repeat that. Orgasm for a man is damaging. You have to understand that the man is like firing a gun. Okay, when you fire a gun too many times, you know what happens to the gun? You have to clean it, or else it's going to jam. And when it jams, the whole thing breaks, and it gets really unusable. Okay, the gun becomes unusable, which is why we have Viagra and all these other pills that have hit the market, because men are oversexed. And I'm going to talk about the healthiness in a second, but men are completely oversexed in our culture, in our countries. And this is why men are failing. Okay, this is why the youth today are rejecting porn, they're rejecting dating. They're literally choosing retention, semen retention and everything else. Looks maxing or whatever the kids call it, because they are deciding to go against the norms. All right. I watched my dad basically turn into Tony Soprano, and my dad was like Tony Soprano. He thought he was hot shit. He really wasn't. He was oversexed. He was cheating on my mom. My mom was cheating on my dad. It was like an episode of The Sopranos. It was stupid. Honestly, it was such a waste of time. What a waste of a life. And like, I'm not saying that like out of like anger or frustration really at all. It's like pity. I pity that. It's like such a waste of a life. So long story short, yeah, this was like men who can't control themselves. Often, it doesn't matter if you're rich, successful, hot, a famous actor, actress, whatever. It's karmic. Okay, when you're willing to do anything for sexual, I guess liberation, you're just accruing bad karma. Okay, I don't want to make this video too much longer. What are we really talking about here? Because I'm going to talk about the woman too, and then I'm going to give you practical advice. We're talking about the autonomic nervous system, male, female, doesn't matter. Okay, we're talking about how there's so much more going on down all the way at the base of the spine. Okay, in the coccygeal sacrum, you've got so many nerves, and it's a difference. So like sexuality cyclically is like neuroplastic, right? So in other words, your brain creates habitual cycles. So if you don't have a healthy sex life, that's the first thing you got to get down. Okay, whether you're having too much or too little. I had a client without oversharing. She had been married for a number of years, like 20 years. She had children with this guy, and she was like, I don't love my husband anymore. I said, okay. And we talked a little bit, and then eventually it came out, I haven't slept with him in 4 years. Well, why? Do you hate him? No, I don't hate him. I think he's a wonderful man. I just haven't had sex with him because I'm not attracted to him because I feel like he's weak. This was Gen X, by the way, which is a very common issue with Gen X men. And the younger generations from there, probably baby boomers down. No, I feel like he's weak. He doesn't go to the gym. He doesn't work enough for me. He doesn't do this. I'm the breadwinner, blah, blah, blah. Basically, long story short, I told you need to sleep with your husband. She did everything. Everything was fine after that. Because if you're in a union, okay, this is part of like the triangle of working relationships in psychology. If you're in a relationship, you need intimacy, passion, and commitment. If you have commitment without the intimacy and the passion, the thing's just going to fizzle out. All right, you need to have those. And intimacy is more like the sexual. Intimacy is more like the connection. The passion is more the sexual. And sometimes they're interchanged. And sometimes they're together and they're connected, right? But either way, you need to have those three pillars in a relationship in order for it to work out. I actually have a great relationship course. I'll show you guys. It's on my school in a second. But it's important, right? So you can't just not sleep with your partner, so to speak. If you're going to marry somebody, it's for life, right? And again, I'm going to tell you guys what the secret solution is in a second here. But okay, I already looked that up. Okay, so long story short, what's really going on here? First of all, we have bioelectricity in the body, all right, and it's really not even about the juices. The juices are the holder of the energy. So it's not really like biochemical. It's not like we're getting a lot of nutrients, even though we are, especially the men who can hold off and have a good repeatable cycle of release and refulfillment. They actually have high peaks in testosterone, high peaks in everything, and that is very, very important. So it's almost like a form of biohacking to understand what the right amount is. I'm going to tell you. But you have all these ganglia, you have all this energy. Now let's talk a little bit about the woman. The woman has the egg. Okay, the woman's body is a receptacle, right? The male's body is the arbiter. It's the giver. The woman's body is the receiver. Okay, so sex for a woman is actually not that big of a deal. Masturbation for a woman is not that big of a deal. In fact, if they don't have sex, this is why it's called a hysterectomy. Like they go hysterical if they don't have enough sexual connection. This is why like young teen girls go fucking crazy for like the Backstreet Boys. All right, it's because they have too much energy, and they don't really have a release for it except orgasm, right? So it's not good to over orgasm as a woman. Like you don't want to be like orgasming even once a day as a woman. Not good, not healthy, because the body and the brain needs some time to reacclimate. For a man, it can take up to 3 weeks for his biochemistry to reactivate normally. For a woman, it's like 1 to 2 weeks. Okay, and they've done these studies with chimps. They've done these studies with other animals that share very similar stuff to us. You can do it. It's not like you can't not have sex every day. People do it all the time, but it's about orgasm, and it's about consistency, and it's about how you're having sex, which is why the Kama Sutra was invented, which is why all these different positions are important. Because when you're having sex in these different positions, you're opening up different channels and gateways of energy to come into you and into your harmony. When you're having sex with a person, your energies are linking together because we all have an auric field, we all have a torus field. So our energy fields link together, and you can either harmonize and elevate, or you can not harmonize at all, or you can harmonize and de-elevate, which is also not good because that's like dragging your partner down. Okay, so there's many ways that we can go about this, but essentially the real secret is that here's Kama Sutra again. The real secret is that you should be aiming to have sexual relations with your partner probably once every 3 to 4 weeks. A lot of people would put my head on a pike, okay, if I said that like too publicly. That's coming from Indian Vedic information. That's coming from, like Kama Sutra. That's coming from the Chinese Tao Neidan when they talk about the Jing. Okay, so men and women have Jing, and this is their essence. And this Jing is energy which is stored within the egg during ovulation and within the seminal fluid throughout basically the entirety of the month. Now, the egg gets released. Okay, the woman's body takes as much energy as she can from that egg, and then the egg, of course, like quote unquote, dies, and the shedding occurs for menstruation, etc. For men, if they store up too much, it's not blue balls or anything like that. It's just it hits a peak, right? Like there's only a certain capacity that the energy can fill. So really, for men, it's a cycle monthly of understanding when to release and give yourself rest, and when to not release and to harness the energy. And for my studies specifically, I have found that when the moon is opposite of your sun sign, that's the best optimal time for release for the man. So first and foremost, I also want to say that they have had tons of studies that have shown that men who can hold off for like 100 days undergo vast changes. But again, that's only if it's repeatable. So in my philosophical mind, the way that I'm seeing it, extremes on any front are bad. Balanced diet is better than vegan or carnivore. We know this. If you're new to the channel and you don't like the balanced path, go find somebody who's going to fill your extreme views. Republican versus Democrat, both are stupid. Like middle path. It's really anything. Male versus female debate, they're both dumb. Get over yourself. Like there's really nowhere you can show me where an extreme is correct. Even take death, for example. Like if somebody breaks into your home, okay, and they're trying to murder you, that's an extreme. But you can murder them back. That's self-defense. That's not extreme. Okay, the situation is extreme, but the concept is not. If somebody says, I defended myself, I had to kill somebody, everybody's just like, you defended yourself, you had to kill somebody. If you go around saying, I murdered someone, that's extreme. So you have to understand that everything in life is a balance, okay? The sex is a balance. So here's the real secret. You can have sex every day. You can have sex every minute of every day, but you can't orgasm every day. That's the secret. You can have as much sex as you like. In fact, sex is great. Sex with your partner all the time, awesome. Who wouldn't want that? Well, you can have it. except you can't eat of the apple. You can't bite down on the orgasm part, which is where everybody fails. Everybody wants to get that, they want to use their partner to achieve orgasm. That's not really what it's about, is it? Sex is about connection. It's about unity. It's about unifying two halves and becoming whole. So why exactly would having a bunch of sex be good for you, right? Like, oh yeah, well, it'll reduce your risk of prostate cancer. This is a health concern. You're dumb. Excuse me, you're dumb. Sorry, that's just dumb. Like, you're not looking at the rest of what seminal fluid is. It takes, I think it takes like 40 drops of blood to make 1 drop of seminal fluid. Okay, and there's, depending on how much volume, there's a lot more than 1 drop of seminal fluid that's coming out. It's a lot of blood that your body, and it doesn't mean like you're losing that blood. It means that that's the blood that like lives and dies just to create that substance within you. Seminal fluid and the egg are very, very powerful, obviously, because when you put them together, we are created. Think about all the stuff we do. We destroy the earth. We make it better. We start wars. We create orphanages, and we create hospitals to heal the sick. Like, we do so many good and bad things. There's so much potential in us, and that's just from those 2 substances alone, right? An egg and a sperm. It's super dumb to think that they don't mean anything. And then, you also have birth control and how that's harmed women, and it's harmed their cycles. Vaping and all this other crap that all these young women are doing, it's harming their cycles on purpose, because to rip you out of your hormones is to rip you out of really, like, health and reality for yourself. So, the arts of the bedchamber, 100 days of foundation. That's really what it is. Let's say are you seeking a relationship? Okay. If you're seeking a relationship as a man, the best thing you can do is go celibate for 100 days. I guarantee you will be leaking testosterone through your pheromones so much by that point that women around you will be, and I know this from my own personal experience. They can smell it on you. Women can smell whether pheromonally, because when you ejaculate, you release pheromones. It tells all the women around you, hey, I'm taken. But if you're masturbating, then and you look gross and you're walking around, all the women are gonna be like, oh, that guy's like freaking weird. I don't want to be anywhere near around him. That's what men don't understand. It's pheromonal. Women can smell it way better than the men can smell it. Men can also smell when a woman's ovulating too. So it's all pheromonal, right? So if you harness your energy, you harness your essence, the women can smell and pick up on that, and they can figure out, oh, this guy doesn't have a woman. Maybe, he seems like he's got a lot of testosterone, or like, obviously that's not how they think. It's all subconscious, right? But anyway, the whole point is, if you're oversexed or if you're undersexed, that's bad. And you don't need to have sex, like, you know what I mean? Like, and you don't need to ejaculate. You don't need to have an orgasm. It's not about that. When you do finally get into a relationship, it's important to keep balance with everything. That's the whole point. Like I mentioned, you can have sex as much as you like, but it's the orgasm part. The orgasm part is the most important part. And it's really, really, really hard to just have sex with a partner and not ejaculate all the time, or have the woman expect an orgasm to happen. In fact, people get disappointed, right? But that's because you're not taking the post care. This is the big important part. And I know, because I'm speaking from experience. I've done this with multiple women in my life. Post care. I don't mean like sitting there and cuddling and stuff, although yeah, that's sometimes part of it. No, it's like holding each other, breathing, doing some stretches, right? Getting the body realigned, going to go get some food and get your mind off of the release part of it. And I can tell you, this whole blue balls thing is bullshit. It's so bullshit. Blue balls exist when you are hormonal, when you are making yourself horny, thinking about sex, seeing sex purposefully or by accident, and it's causing a reaction within you. If you don't have control over your own sexual appetite, then yes, you will get blue balls because you want to release, but you can't. You're forcing yourself not to. That causes a energy blockage. That's what blue balls really is. It's an energy blockage. You can produce tons of seminal fluid. In fact, men who are in comas, great example. Men can be in comas for years. They don't ejaculate at all because they don't need to, because they're not fucking consciously thinking about sex. They're not consciously thinking about anything. So the semen just keeps getting recreated and then reused and repurposed for the body. It's you who is giving yourself blue balls. It's you who is constantly horny and you're like, oh, I can't do anything about it. And you can't feel guilt and shame and all these negative emotions surrounding sex. It will cause energy blockages, or it'll come out in really weird ways, because sex is a big thing linked to psychology. It is really the arbiter of how we perceive the start of the cycle of everything is sex. Sex is like, in one cycle, in the cycle of life, sex is the beginning of the end. It's where you get old enough to have children. So now it's not about you anymore. Your life ends and a new one begins. But in the cycle of death, sex is the beginning stage of it, right? Because it's exactly what I just said. So in the cycle of life, it's towards the end. And in the cycle of death, it's towards the beginning of the state. I mean, think about teenage years, right? Teenage years is where your body starts to really die, like realistically. Like if you really want to get serious about life, you are a child, which is this immortal being. You're just like, yeah, you're growing and stuff, but you're not really growing. You know, like you're just existing and you're getting a little bit bigger and stuff like that. Once you hit puberty, all the things change. Excuse me. Wow. Sorry. You completely transform. So anyway, lots of really cool stuff. Thank you guys for watching. I'm going to pause here. Let me show you guys my two big accomplishments that I want to show off. My AI tool, it tracks your inner monthly alchemical cycle. Go check that out. My online university, my school, always popping. It's got tons of really great stuff. Lots of people liking and talking about stuff. Yeah, exactly. So go check these out. In my school, I just released a bunch of brand new courses: relational healing, meditation and prayer, symbolism and symbology, pop culture, hidden secrets, herbology, crystals, chakras, quantum healing, and I've got a lot more to go. As you can see, these are drafted out. Daily habits and rituals, the hero's journey, the dangers of spiritual psychosis, facial expression and body language, understanding the soul, elemental mastery. I did just complete the Kabbalah course that I talked about like a week ago, so I'm sticking to what I'm telling you guys here. Tarot, shadow work, alchemy, and then of course I've got my consciousness activation masterclasses, which are already here. As you can see, I'm hard at work here, guys. I'm working nonstop, 7 days a week, making content, getting all this stuff out here, and I'm making ends meet, I guess you could say. So anything helps. Please spread the information around. Get the word out. I joined the school. It's really cool. A lot of people are chatting about it. So I love you guys. I'll see you in the next video. Take care and enjoy your weekends.